We can all start finding our seats. Meeting will be called to order in a moment. Let me just make a quick announcement. The Audit Committee meeting will be postponed until next month.
I think we're going to do it before the board meeting at 8:30.
Of course.
It's Thursday, and that's a Thursday because it's President's Day.
Okay, the meeting of the Finance Committee is called to order. Are there any members of the public who have registered and wish to make a comment?
We have 3 public speakers that registered. The first one would be Murray Bowden, followed by Omar Vera.
This is the 5th presentation I'm making today about looking into positive train control and an awareness of its outdated technology. And I've identified 2 areas where due diligence has not been done. The most interesting comment so far today was Andy, the new president of Transit, who said he's going to look at the root causes of why the system isn't working well. And the various agencies here have not done due diligence to find out, one, why Metro North permitted a red box in Roaring Brook, and 2, why Bridges and Tunnels did not require the yellow line where it belongs. And the reasons for both of those instances need to be addressed so that you can then address the fact that positive train control is not a viable technology today, that some form of autonomous control will be implemented. The question is, how much money will you spend before you figure it out?
Thank you, Mr. Vera. Next, followed by Mr. Kevin Zeng.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, MTA Finance Committee, and Happy New Year. We're here, beginning of another year. All right. Now, because we're in an even number year, we're all probably aware that by the end of this year, we're probably going to hold a series of public hearings regarding the fare and toll changes that they've been doing every year since 08, 09 area. Am I correct? But yes, any fare and toll changes that must occur has to first get like the consent and input of the public, which is why we hold these public hearings. But if they must be made, they have to be made with the in correspondence and in complement with the increased wages that people make here in New York State. Public transportation is supposed to be affordable, and it's not supposed to be like a luxury, but it's meant for all. Hence the name public, which is why I said like I strongly am against like increasing anything to like any base fare of $3. But if you must do it, it has to be with bonuses. Can't just be like this. And like I said, I'm also in opposition to any MetroCard fees when buying new MetroCards. That started in 2013, but like I said, it's. Like I said, you can disagree with me, but it feels like robbery. But I'm in other news though. Let me just express my my pleasure that you're finally starting to install tap and go cards at the Penn stations, both at 8th Avenue and at the Broadway 7th Avenue lines. That's a plus because it's time for the MetroCard to go. And I believe Susan once said the MetroCard was like you kicked the old turtle. You said that back in November of 16. I remember.
Please conclude your remarks.
All right. So with that said, I'm glad we're going forward. But like I said, public transportation should be at least affordable and fair to everybody. Thank you.
Mr. Zeng.
Hello. Good afternoon to friend of our air. My name is Kevin Zeng. I would like to request that the MTA R211 subway car more open gangway cars increase. 6th Avenue and 3rd Avenue install platform screen door station on the L train during the 14th Street tunnel shutdown and MetroCards transfer. Because R211 subway car needs to increase for the base order including 40 R211T with open gangway cars, option 1 740 and option 2 520 New York City Transit open gangway cars. 6th Avenue and 3rd Avenue station are too crowded on the L train platform. I use the pay-per-ride MetroCards or student MetroCards transfer from subway to bus to another subway. It doesn't work. R211 subway cars needs to increase 1,300 open gangway cars and in decreasing closed-end subway cars. But I don't like the closed-end subway cars, and I like the open gangway cars better. 6th Avenue and 3rd Avenue station on the L train needs to install platform screens door, and including renovation station as well. MetroCards needs 3 transfers for subway to bus to another subway, bus to subway to another bus, bus to another bus to subway, and subway to another subway to bus during planned and unplanned change. MetroCards needs 2 transfers from subway to another subway during planned and unplanned change. Thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you, Mr. Zhang. That concludes the public speakers today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Next, the approval of minutes. They are included in the committee book. May I have a motion to approve and a second? Are there any changes to the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The minutes are approved. Mr. Johnson, would you please take us through the work plan?
Yes, sir. A draft of the 2018 Finance Committee work plan was provided in the December 2017 committee book. The work plan is included in this book on page 12, and we need a motion to approve it.
Is there a second? Is there any discussion on the work plan? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The work plan is accepted. Now we're on budget and capital cycle items.
Thanks. So I'm going to take you through Budget Watch. We do a flash Budget Watch in January. It's a first look at 2017 results, and it captures preliminary results for revenues, subsidies, and debt service. At this point, 2017 operating expense information are either unavailable or too preliminary to be meaningful. Actual results for the year are compared with the 2017 final estimate captured in the November financial plan that was approved by the board in December. Starting with revenue, preliminary 2017 passenger revenues were unfavorable by $5.3 million, which reflected unfavorable variances of $3.6 million at Metro North due to lower non-commutation ridership, and $2.5 million at the LIRR due to lower commutation ridership. Serving as a partial offset was favorable variances of $1.3 million at New York City Transit, and that was primarily due to higher bus revenue, which offset lower subway revenue. Overall, they were net slightly favorable at NYCT. Moving to tolls, B&T toll revenue ended the year $11.8 million favorable to the final estimate, with higher projected traffic in the last quarter of 2017. Moving to debt service, 2017 debt service of $2.51 billion was $15 million or 0.6% favorable. That reflected interest rate savings through multiple advanced refundings. Now I'm going to move to subsidies. State dedicated taxes and fees were $12 million unfavorable for the year, primarily as a result of lower PMT collections also in the last quarter of 2017. Offsetting that were real estate transaction taxes that were $16 billion favorable as we had higher urban tax collections in the last quarter. So
that's billion, I think that's
billion. Yeah, billion. Hopefully it wasn't million. So overall, again, we're not talking about expenses. So with the limited data that we have, when we compared with the final estimate, we're a little bit favorable. Total revenue was slightly favorable by $10 million, reflecting the favorable toll revenue and the real estate transaction tax revenue, and that was again partially offset by unfavorable passenger revenue and the lower PMT revenue. And also debt service was $15 million favorable. Sorry, I'm having trouble with that. I just wanted to alert you.
Before we get
or
off,
give you
Mr. Chairman, could you remind me again the difference between Regional Mortgage Recording Tax 1 and Regional Mortgage Recording Tax 2?
Yeah, so MRT 1 is paid for by the buyer on all mortgages. Yeah. It's imposed at the borrower at the rate of 0.3% on both commercial and residential mortgages. That's first used to meet HQ costs, and then anything that's left over.
And that's in the entire region?
The entire region,
all the 12
that's right.
counties?
Yep.
Okay.
So MRT 2 also in the entire region, including all the counties, and that's for residential real estate structures containing 1 to 6 dwellings at a rate of 0.25%, and that's imposed on the lender. That's right.
Okay. But both of them are paid in the entire region.
The entire region.
As opposed to the New York City urban tax, which is only paid in New York City.
That's right.
At certain levels.
And that also includes an MRT within New York City.
Right. Okay.
That's right.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Bob. In addition to 2017 results, we wanted to talk about the latest state budget. So last Tuesday, the governor released the 2018 to 2019 fiscal year executive budget. In total, the MTA will receive more than $4.8 billion from all state sources, and that's an increase of $334 million, or 7.4%, over the fiscal year 2017-2018 enacted budget. That's comprised of MMTOA being $15 million higher. Again, now I'm talking year to year. PBT going up by $22 million, PMT by $114 million, and the general fund increase of $194 million. Now, included within those numbers is support for the MTA Subway Action Plan. So the state will provide $254 million in operating aid to fully fund its half of the Subway Action Plan. The state budget also includes $174 million for its half of the capital funding requirement of that action plan. Sure, Andrew.
Wasn't the Subway Action Plan something like $839 or some odd million dollars?
Well,
how was
It's $508 million. It's $508 million operating expense, so half of that is $254, right. And then I think it was $348 was the capital, so half of that is $174.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And is all of that half in the state?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it included, so the 174 isn't part of our operating budget, right? So I'm going to talk now about the impacts of these tax levels versus what we had included in the November financial plan. Like I said, the budget increases the MMTOA to the MTA. It's actually a $19 million increase over the 17-18 level, and that raises the amount to $1.687 billion. That amount is, however, $61 million lower than the estimate that we had included within our November plan projection. So while it's higher than last year, it's lower than what we had included. Also, our November plan assumed the restoration of the payroll mobility tax replacement fund of $65 million. As of right now, the budget does not include that, so that is a hit, unless something changes, to our financial plan. Other subsidy sources basically offset each other. Slightly higher PBT was offset by slightly lower projections for MTA aid and AMTAP. So basically the two major impacts versus our plan would be the lower MMTOA of $61 million and the lower PMT replacement of 65. So with rounding, it comes out to about a $125 million hit on our 2018 November financial plan.
Go ahead, you can go first. I'll let you go.
The point to make there is this is the executive budget. I'm sorry. Thank you. It's the executive budget. If you recall, last year, the 65 million replacement funds were restored. We are having discussions right now about that 65 million. But again, this is preliminary, and we'll go through the negotiations. Doug also mentioned, and some board members weren't here, but we have favorable budget variances just on operations. So that's about 25 million to the good. So right now, what we're looking at is 125 lower than what our November plan or the adopted budget was. But again, with the 25 million, it's 100 less. And again, 60 of that is just an estimate. You know, if we're estimating TOA monies and the total amount is around $1.7 billion, it's hard to be exact. And so we're slightly off on that. But the action was the 65 million, and there are continued discussions going on about that. So.
And the 65 million was restored, but to capital. It was taken originally from operating.
Yeah. And if you recall, what we did is because we had pay-as-you-go capital, we knew that we could then substitute their capital for our capital, and we put that back into the operating budget. So through that, we ended up being neutral.
Are there the toll rebates? Are those still included in the proposed executive budget?
They are at a $3 million lower level than last year. But again, last year, those monies were also reinstated by the legislature. So at this point, it's the executive budget. We don't have an enacted budget, obviously.
Anyone else?
I would say one other change, if I may. I'm sorry. One other change is the payroll mobility tax has been subject to appropriation in every other year. The change this year is they are proposing to give that to us directly, which means that that money would not be subject to, appropriation. It wouldn't be subject to perhaps a late budget, but the monies would just flow to us on a monthly basis. So there wouldn't be any real lag, maybe a few days. But the proposal is that that money will come to us directly. As you may recall, we want to bond against the PMT. We believe we'll get a higher rating. Strong arguments are made that if we don't have appropriation risk, that should enhance the credit further. So we'll see where we go, but that is a change.
Mr. Jones.
Support in debt service, in new debt.
The way to look at it is that we're already bonding against that,
Understood.
Commissioner. So the difference in the credit rating on our fare box bonds and our credit rating on these bonds with the same revenue stream, it's about $530 million of present value benefit. So in other words, the same revenue stream, if we can bond it at the higher credit, we can get $530 million. So that's really...
Yeah, understood.
That's it.
This actually raises a question I've been meaning to ask you for a while, Bob. There was a piece a couple of months ago, a big piece in the New York Times about the MTA, and one of the little items in it was that the state was in effect charging a fee for giving advice and managing our financings. Is that still happening, and is that, which financings are they charging a fee for?
The state charges all authorities who sell debt a BIC. It's the bond investment fee or
bond issuance
fee,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like 0.8% on the amount of new money issuance. They have been charging that when we do refundings. We ask for a waiver, and they grant us the waiver. The budget director was quoted in the paper as saying that he wants to waive that and do away with that. So we're certainly going to try to hold him to that. But we get charged just like every other authority that issues debt. And that's in state law.
But the state has the authority to waive it?
The budget director.
And how much does that cost us each year?
It's going to be in the presentation.
Yeah.
We'll show you the number of what we pay.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Carl, as I served on the dormitory authority simultaneously with the beginning of this term. They consistently had the charge of the bond issuance fee, and every once in a while, the state would waive it. You'd have to go big, and then you'd get it waived, but it was not a general rule. The general predilection was to charge for the bond issuance fee. And that's across the board.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure, what service do we get for?
It's not a matter of service. It's a charge that the state of New York levies against all bond issuance from any authority chartered by the state.
So in effect, it's a
fee.
tax on the privilege of us being able to issue debt.
Correct.
I think this is, I'm trying to remember when it was passed, but it seems like it's 20 years ago. I mean, it's been out there for a long
This goes back to the mid-1990s. It has kind of stepped up periodically. The legislature has taken actions to increase the level of the charge itself. I want to say beginning in 2011, we began petitioning for a waiver of the BIC charge in connection with any refunding, and they have honored that and given us those waivers in the cases of refundings. However, in the case of new money borrowings, we have continued to pay it up until this recent statement by the budget director. So now we are seeking full relief from the BIC on every bond issuance where it would be applicable.
This has been going on for over a dozen years.
20.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sorry, thank you. One thing, Bob, that you didn't mention, and if you did, apologies, I may have been out, but when you were talking about the PMT, I know in the governor's proposed budget there is the cost, the proposed or anticipated costs around congestion pricing and the infrastructure there, and how the PMT might relate to the cost of that infrastructure. Would you go into that a little further, please?
There was a line in the budget document that said, and this PMT or this enhanced credit that would generate funds could be used to help implement the cost of congestion pricing. The installation, I think, of the technology is the way it was described. Clearly, we have the PMT earmarked for our existing capital programs, but since the congestion pricing isn't expected to happen right away, it's, the first year we're expecting the for-hire vehicles, and it would be the second year if it's passed where we'd start to see congestion pricing revenues. There would need to be some advance funding for the technology, and so what we're looking at is just a matter of, can we advance funds to be reimbursed? But since we need the PMT revenues to support our existing capital program, we could certainly use it to advance fund the technology, but I would expect that the congestion pricing would have to pay for the technology and then give us the incremental revenues that, it's determined. So,
Anything else?
So we'll move on to Finance Watch. It appears on page 20 of your book. I'm not going to go through that in detail. I sent out a detailed email to the full board on Friday, and everything is summarized in that email. In addition, the one thing I did want to point out is that this Thursday we will be taking bids on $350 million of TBTA general revenue bonds, and we're looking forward to that transaction in the market, and we'll report on that next month. But the conclusions of the other transactions are in Finance Watch, and I'm happy to take any questions if there are any. Okay. All right.
Okay. We're going to move to headquarter and all agency items. There's one action item requesting board approval to procure additional insurance coverage related to MTA's 2015 to 2019 capital plan owner-controlled insurance program to include the Long Island Railroad expansion project. The total amount of this request is $84,500,000. Phyllis Rackmith is here to take any questions if there are any.
Before questions or comments, may I have a motion? Second.
Second.
Mr. Weisbrot.
Yes. Thank you. Could you explain this? I just couldn't follow it at all, and up until now, we didn't have insurance for the Long Island Railroad expansion project?
Phyllis is going to come up and explain this.
When we went out for the OSIP for the capital program, we included this in the scope of work, but at the time we weren't sure if the project was going to go OSIP or not. And then the Long Island Railroad came to us once the vendor was selected, the contractor, and asked us to include this in the OSIP, so we had to go back and change and add the funding to cover the insurance costs.
I'm sorry, you'll have to explain what the OSIP is.
It's an owner-controlled insurance program where we cover the workers' compensation, the general liability, and the builder's risk. And we have a rolling OSIP for the 15 to 19 capital plan, and now we've added this project.
And why wouldn't this be included in the first place?
Because the Long Island Railroad at the time was not ready to commit to this. And Dennis, you're here. They put out the bid for the contractor and wanted to see how the insurance would come in on the contractor's bid, and then came to us.
So presumably the contractor's bid came in much higher than 84?
I would assume so.
So you mean, just so I'm clear on this, that the entire capital program, other than the Long Island Railroad expansion, costs $225 million for total insurance coverage, and this component alone is 33% of,
well, it's
33% of our entire, or more than 25% of our entire capital budget.
Yes, because it's based on construction value. So the other projects are smaller. This is a mega project.
So therefore, the entire capital program is not covered by this. Only pieces of the capital program are
Yes.
covered by this. Because I think Commissioner
Yes.
Weisbrot said the entire program.
No,
but
it's
that's
not the entire program. There are pieces of the program that are covered. And based on construction value, based on the type of projects that they are, and this project now is added, and we were requested to go out and have the broker add the program.
So are there parts of the, I appreciate that there are lots of the capital program that doesn't involve construction at all, but when you think of the construction part of the entire capital budget, are there other construction items in the capital budget that wouldn't be covered by the OSIP?
That are covered?
That would not be?
Yeah, there are some. There are some. It depends. Some of the sandy work, it depends on pollution work we don't cover. Just buying the rail cars, it's not considered construction. So we sit and go with the capital people and go through the budget to determine what will be covered.
Who's the OSIP carrier?
There are different carriers. Star is the lead carrier on this.
And who's the broker?
Willis.
Are you taking a vote on this?
Yes.
And just so you
Please
know...
mark me recused.
Okay.
So that one around the corner.
Yeah.
Are we ready? Yes.
I just want to make sure this is clear. The cost for this is from the Long Island Railroad project?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Are we ready for a vote? Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? Mr. Merdler is recused. This item carries, and now we're on to reports and information items.
Yeah, there are two reports and information items for headquarters that are included on Director's desk and in the exhibit book for the Finance Committee meeting. Pat McCoy is here to present the 2017 year-end finance review.
Quickly, and be happy to take questions as we go. This is our annual report summarizing the debt portfolio. As you can see here, $36.7 billion of outstanding debt across our core credits, and I'm going to focus quickly on our activities last year. Debt by resolution predominantly falls under the transportation revenue credit. As you can see here, 61.5% or $22 billion on the TRB, dedicated tax 5.3, and TBTA 7.3 senior and 1.3 billion subordinate. This is what our debt profile looks like. And as you can see here, we typically do issue debt with level debt service, and you can see going out to our final maturity of 2057. And all this is summarized in our financial plan in detail.
And Pat, one point, this is as of a date and time, so this does not have the debt that we will issue this year and next year's.
Right. This shows our debt that we currently have on the books, the $36.7 billion.
Again, for the sake of clarity, this assumes that aside from our current obligations, we don't borrow another nickel.
Right. Yep. This doesn't show
as of probably year-end.
December 31st. Yep. This is our year-end snapshot of debt outstanding and what our obligations are.
Yeah, I think one of the points we just wanted to make is you'll see that the highest level of it goes out to about 15 years. Okay, and then it does start to go down. But we continue, when we sell debt, we sell level debt service, so it would continue to go up, gradually, and then of course it would drop off down, but there is an upward trend in any year because we sell debt.
Okay. I'm not going to go through the market recap, but there's...
Pat, what was the explanation for the drop-off 10 years out?
Sure. So remember that with each new issuance of debt, we lay on what we call level debt. So there's a portion of the principal is laid on each year, going all the way out to typically we'll do a 30-year final maturity. In some cases, we'll go out to 35-year final maturity if the asset life of the project justifies that. And so this just reflects that normal amortization based on a level debt structure.
The reason that it really drops off in 2032 is, if you remember, we did the debt restructuring in 2002, and so we sold 30-year level debt going out there. So this is basically saying we're completely through with, that debt restructuring that saved. But that's why it is. We squared the corner off, and so we have 15 years left. Really on that.
Okay.
Please continue.
Okay. I promised just a quick summary of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 tax reform. This did become law on December 22nd, and the biggest effect to us will be the fact that tax-exempt advance refundings have been prohibited. We have typically used this tool to manage our debt portfolio, and unfortunately this has been taken away. So when we do a refunding, it will have to be when that bond becomes what we call currently callable. We issue our bonds with a 10-year, typically a 10-year par call. So if we issue those bonds today, in 10 years we can refund them if rates are attractive at that time in 10 years.
Yeah, going forward, are we going to have the same call date as we issue new debt?
We are going to explore other potential call alternatives, maybe a 5-year call or a 7-year call, coming down the yield curve a little bit.
Right.
So that's a good question, and we are exploring that with our advisors at the moment. There are obviously other changes, but I'll keep going here, okay. So just quickly summarizing 2017, it was $9.9 billion in activity. $2.9 billion of it was for new money borrowing. We did retire bans and RANs. The $5.25 billion of refunding bonds reflects significant activity, again, taking advantage of those advanced refunding opportunities before the year was up. And I just want to compliment our work team that managed to pull a significant amount of activity off in the last 6 weeks of the year to successfully take advantage of those rates. And then lastly, we had remarketing and tender obligations that we just normally take care of to keep the variable rate portfolio outstanding. Let me just go on. There's remarketings, financing approaches. Let me just, our ratings, the one thing about our ratings, we did see an upgrade from Fitch last year reflecting amended criteria, and that was certainly good news. As you can see, we have strong ratings across the board here. Investor outreach. Next year, we're looking at about a $6.1 billion year, and you can see the different vehicles we'll use to manage that debt. And then lastly, there was a question about costs, and here you see our 2017 costs of issuance summary. The bond issuance fee, Commissioner Weisbrod, is at the top line. $10.9 million is what we paid last year. And again, we will continue, and I would expect that that will be zero for the 2018 year. We're going to continue to push to get those waivers. And then the other categories of experts and professionals that we rely on to access the capital markets are covered here. So happy to take any questions.
Do we have any idea, now, the advantage we have under pre-17 tax law was that we could do refinancing, tax-exempt refinancing whenever we wanted to. There was no date certain.
Right.
Now we can only do it at certain times.
Correct.
Do we have any idea how much that may cost us? Now, I understand it's interest rate related, but if that action had not been taken by Congress, do we have any idea what we might have done in 18 that we can now not do?
Typically, we did not plan for advance refundings because they are very much market-sensitive transactions. So we don't have a number that I can give you that we would have planned on doing. But we have normally been able to, take advantage of those dips in the market and do these advance refundings. So it has been a meaningful part of our portfolio management toolbox, and one that we will miss.
What did we do in 17?
So in 2017, let me just $5.25 billion of refundings. I think, say $5 billion were advanced refundings. That saved us $534 million, or 9.7% on a.
So the 500. So to put it mildly, the $500 million, give or take, we saved in 17, we cannot do in 18.
That's right. That's gone.
Is that a fair understanding of where we are?
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Okay.
That's gone.
The other point I'd like to make is Pat and his team, as he mentioned, in the last month of the year, did about $2.6 billion. So we picked up just about everything we thought we could pick up. Mm-hmm. We would have liked to have done a little bit more, but the market wasn't there. Too many people were rushing in, and it was pushing interest rates up.
Everybody saw the same thing we saw.
That's it.
Right.
But with regard to, did we leave a lot on the table? No, we tried to pick up everything that we possibly could. And there may be opportunities that will come about that we can no longer take advantage of. That's a fair statement. Earlier, we'll have to wait. Yes,
that's correct. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So,
thank you.
The point here.
Okay. We also have.
Sorry.
We have a draft of the independent auditor's review report of MTA consolidated interim financial statements for the 9-month period ended September 30th, 2017. That'll actually go to audit next month, as today's meeting is postponed. Next, we have David Ross with the procurements.
Thank you, Doug. So for headquarters, there are 27 procurements for a grand total of $61,051,243. There's one non-competitive procurement for a miscellaneous procurement contract for a total of $16,783,066. That contract is with Kronos. Kronos has provided timekeeping systems for bridges and tunnels, Long Island Railroad, New York City Transit, and Metro North for some time. So there's an installed base of equipment here that is difficult to get away with, hence the non-competitive procurement. Nonetheless, we negotiated a 30% discount off commercial list price on all software, which is 5% lower than federal GSA pricing and 10% lower than under an expiring New York State General Services contract. We're also 11% lower than the GSA contract on their hardware. So it would just, we would have to replace the timekeeping systems for multiple agencies that use Kronos to get away from that. There are 17 competitive procurements for miscellaneous and
Before you do that, let me
Sure.
just get these out of the way first.
Oh, I'm sorry, Freddie.
Before any questions or comments, may I have a motion? Second. Questions or comments on this so far? All in favor? Opposed? Yes. Mr. Redler?
Item 6-16,
You
So I'm gonna be
recuse on
getting-
that item.
Oh, okay.
I take it you are yes on everything else. Okay. Opposed? Abstaining? It carries with one recusal on one item. Mr. Ross, please proceed.
Thank you. So the next, there are 17 competitive procurements for miscellaneous and personal services contracts and a modification for a total of $21,320,950. So the first of theirs, there are 2 arts for transit items, both for Long Island Railroad stations. One is the Long Island Railroad Station at Syosset for $185,000 with Thomas E. Fruin. The other one is a Long Island Railroad Northport Station with Philip Duke Riley. There was an incorrect number shown somewhere in the book, I believe. The correct number is $249,000. In some places it shows $175,000. So the correct number is the $249,000. The next contract I'll talk about is for governance risk.
Let me just do this in order. Let me have
sure.
a motion to approve.
I'm still going to go on the other 17.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, there are. That was
Okay,
just
go
the
ahead.
first
Go
two
right
of-
ahead then.
That was 2 of the 17, so. Yeah. So the next is a contract with Ernst & Young LLC. It's for a governance risk and compliance system. It's a 4-year contract for $4,795,000 and $879. And the new system will establish and maintain a system of internal controls and facilitate internal control reviews. We received 3 proposals, 2 that included the same software. The MTA currently uses an aging version of Oracle's governance risk and compliance software. It's been determined the technology it's running is obsolete, and the committee unanimously selected Ernst & Young, one of the 2 vendors offering the RSA Archer solution. The next one of the competitive procurements is with BlackRock Financial Management for investment portfolio manager services. This is a 3-year contract with 2 option years for a total of $2,875,000. They'll perform portfolio management services in connection with the assets held within the First Mutual Transportation Insurance Company. We received 8 proposals, 3 that failed technical reviews, 5 others made it through orals. The incumbent is Goldman, so we're replacing the current incumbent with BlackRock Financial. The next contract is for strategic initiatives. It's an award with Raymond James Associates to serve as insurance-linked securities risk financial advisor to the First Mutual Insurance Company and the MTA, and additionally establishes 4 panels of qualified firms, each of which will include firms eligible to serve in the roles of ILS legal counsel, ILS initial purchaser structuring agent, ILS risk modeler, and provider of ILS electronic platform, respectively. These panels will offer a ready list of firms qualified to offer services in connection with future insurance risk transfer, capital markets-based transactions of FEMTAC. The use of any one of those firms off of those panels will be done by a mini bid that would be brought back to the board subsequently. So the amount that's shown in the staff summary is just for the services of Raymond James Associates. So it's just for the risk financial advisor only.
And just a quick point of clarification. I don't think the many bids are going to come back for board approval. I think that's, what's being approved is the firms themselves, and then the many bids in the future would be done, with the assistance of procurement, but we wouldn't seek new board of authorization at that point. Thanks.
Okay. The next contract is with Palm Coast Data, and this is an extension of a contract with Palm Coast to continue to provide MetroCard extended sales fulfillment services for an additional 3 years. And they provide an alternative for customers to get MetroCards that are distributed out of the system through the MetroCard extended sales merchant network. An RFP would be impractical because we're winding down on the use of the MetroCards, and we would have to do a new RFP, and it would be an expensive proposition for new vendors to ramp up from production. And actually, the usage anticipated off this contract tails off over the course of the next 5 years. So the amounts used each year declines. So the amount shown is for the full 5 years of that. And
David?
So that's it. That's it for the 17 items.
Okay. May I have a motion and then a second on these 17, and then comments and questions? Second. Comments and questions. Mr. Albert, Ms. Vanterpool.
I understand what you said, Dave, about the Palm Coast winding down, but was there nobody in New York State we could have found to do this?
Yeah, I know that
Do I see a consolidation opportunity here?
Yeah, I know that there were problems getting competition on the previous procurements generally, so it's just been one of those things. It's a tough market, and it was a tough market when they were doing 5-year contracts with continuing sales at the levels that we've historically done. So it just seemed highly unlikely that anybody would participate in a new procurement.
All right.
Before or now?
Now, winding down for MetroCards, that's right.
All right. Okay, if there's nothing else, we're ready for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? These procurements carry. His recusal on that one item. There are, you want to talk about the other 9?
Sure. So there are 9 procurement actions for ratification pursuant to Executive Order 168 and its extension for a total of $22,947,222. They're all New York City Transit items, and more than half is to maintain and repair 18 elevators at 5 stations in Washington Heights.
May I have a motion and a second? Okay, questions and comments. Ms. Vanterpool.
Would someone explain, please, how technical changes on 160 articulated buses is part of the subway action plan? And how or why in the replacement of glass panels and anti-graffiti film is also part, and why those are actions that could not have gone through the normal procurement process?
Hello again. The change orders for the buses are not part of the subway action plan. They're part of EO 168. And those were to expedite some of those changes that we needed for those bus orders. Rather than bring them to the board, we're bringing them to the board for ratification. Your other question, which one was that on? I'm sorry?
Glass panels and graffiti?
That was just so that we could expedite the procurement. On that particular item, we had informal competition. So we reached out to the folks that would have otherwise, that are on the bidders list, and we competed them. We just didn't go to the formality of having to advertise and do all that.
What?
It was to expedite it to get it in place.
I mean, the whole purpose of the exec... I'm sorry.
Mr. Weisbrot.
I apologize for cutting off Ms. Vanderpool. Did I? Okay.
I don't think she's troubled by it. It's okay.
The whole purpose of the executive order was to deal with the emergency. And the 2 items you mentioned are not emergencies. I mean, they're shortcuts, and I appreciate it's always nice to do a shortcut. But this is a very kind of abuse of the executive order that I think we're all sort of trying hard to avoid. Otherwise, it really will, to me, put at risk the ability of the governor to make executive orders, deal with emergencies, and have a justification for doing it. And in the two cases that you mentioned, it's fine that we can expedite something, but that's not what an emergency order is designed to do.
I respectfully disagree with regard to it being abuse. These were items that were clearly identified. Certainly, I will say the elevator and escalator glass and anti-graffiti, keeping those in a state of good repair, and the fact that we wanted to get that contract in place so that we could do so was considered to be in the best interest of our customers, as well as getting the system in a state of good repair, particularly with the focus on elevators and escalators.
Well, I mean, in all fairness, almost everything we do, if not presumably everything we do, is in the best interests of our customers. I mean, the standard is not whether it's in the best interests of our customers. The standard is whether it's a response to an emergency situation. And in neither of these cases, it seems to me, can this be justified as a response to an emergency situation? Yeah, I mean, we all want to do things faster and expeditiously, and indeed, I'm, along with my colleague here, Mr. Merdler, and Ms. Vanderpool, are on your task force to improve the procurement process. But I think we really do and have an obligation to both the law and to the governor, really, to not take advantage of, not abuse the emergency process that has been established.
Yeah,
Mr. Greenberg.
I don't remember us ever approving, even a ratification, contracts with such scant description. I would have appreciated a paragraph on each, at least a paragraph on each, that describes why, the justification as to why this was an emergency, what problem it seeks to address, and a summary of the informal competition that happened. I mean, I think that's what the board needs in order to pass on this. I mean, yeah, looking at them on face value, most of them I think are part. I know where they're coming from. If you're here, you know. But I do think we need a paragraph on each at least. I don't know what everyone else thinks, but I think a paragraph on each about those basic things. Why? And also another thing: how much time was saved by going through this process? In other words, what happens? What if we decided, for instance, for the buses to go through the regular change order process? How long would that have taken to get board approval through the regular process, as opposed to this? How much time was saved? I mean, I think those basic things is what I feel the board should see before passing on these procurements.
I can attempt to answer or respond to some of that. I mean, the issue for us is that the buses were in manufacture, and we did not want to stop it. It's in some instances when we have these types of change orders, we don't want to impact the delivery of the buses. So when we have these changes, we actually negotiate them and then authorize them to move forward with them, so as not to impact while they're actually in production. And this,
so that's the rationale for that?
Excuse me?
That's the rationale?
Exactly, in terms of being able to sit there and not impact the actual manufacture of the buses.
Right.
And this has been what we've done on other bus builds, so that we don't, A, delay the delivery, and B, we're not in a place where we're going to be paying even more costs with regard to the disruption.
You've done ratifications on other bus orders?
Correct.
A change order ratification? Okay, I'm not saying we haven't. It's just that usually there's a full staff summary. I'm not even asking for that.
There was a decision to put these ratifications forward consistent to what we did with Superstorm Sandy, and this is the way we presented them in the past. We can certainly discuss expanding on those explanations in the future.
I think that's what you're hearing from members of this committee, but
that's fine.
But just to be clear, this is about expediting manufacture and eventual delivery of the buses.
Absolutely.
Wrong?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Mr. Jones.
Couldn't this have been done just through the normal process?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Couldn't this have been done just through the normal process? Couldn't you have come to the board, said, we got to get this done, and we'd like approval? I mean, why did this has to be wrapped up in the emergency order? I'm maybe not being clear, but I'm intrigued. If there was no governor's order, how would you have dealt with this?
we would have come back similarly through a ratification on these orders.
Would that have been so terrible? I'm sorry, withdrawn. Okay.
On that, I mean, I think, David, he said that typically they'll do a ratification on a bus procurement. But as I pointed out, that when we do those ratifications, we see much more material than we see here as to justification and the and how much, I mean, I don't remember what the original bus order was and how much, you see a percentage of how much this change order is worth as the total thing. I mean, it's all laid out in paper. We've all seen this information. Here, it's not here. I mean, some of these things, you can see the elevators are terrible. We have a bad situation there. I think doing this is fine. But, I mean, some of the information I'd like to have is what do we say, how much time do we save? What would we have lost if we went through the regular process is really something that I'm asking for. Maybe even a paragraph on each would be fine for me. I don't know what anybody else wants.
Let me address some of the issues. The original bus order was $109.9 million. And one of the other reasons why we used the executive order was because we would have otherwise had to wait for OSC review and approval of this contract before we would have been able to issue it. One of the items of an emergency is that we were able to forego the OSC approval, which saved us, on average, about close to 90 days. That's a significant savings, yes.
And it would have been nice to have a paragraph that said that, so that we could, in any case.
I'm picking up on that.
Good. Good.
Well,
because I was worried it was obscure.
Not at all. It's crystal clear.
But just to be clear, I have a slightly different point, I think, which is that the purpose of the executive order and the expedited process under the executive order was to deal with the emergency that the executive order sets forth. And neither of these two items do that. And so it seems to me that for all the savings here, and I appreciate the savings on time, and I do hope we can just make the procurement process much more efficient than it clearly is. But I just am concerned about expanding what the executive order was designed to cover.
Well, I think we've, let me make a suggestion, for whatever it is worth. I think Mr. Plachaki has heard this committee, Mr. Ross has heard this committee.
I think we've all heard it. Yeah.
Good. And very little of it is obscure. I'm going to reluctantly vote yes on these, even though I have some small reservations about it, because there are some things that I just don't want to slow down and stop. But I think there's a guidepost here for the future that we're all focused on right now. So, all in favor? Opposed?
I'm just opposed to these two items.
Abstaining? The procurements carry. Thank you. Now, we're ready for Long Island Railroad procurements?
Right. So there are no Metro North items for Long Island Railroad. There are two procurements for a grand total of $98.7 million. The first is a non-competitive multi-agency sole source procurement requesting board approval in the aggregate amount not to exceed $18.325 million to purchase services and parts required to support Long Island Railroad's, Metro North's, and New York City Transit's inventory of equipment designed and manufactured by Ansaldo. The parts and services are only available from Ansaldo as they possess the design information, requisite expertise, and proprietary software required to operate and maintain this equipment. The second is a competitive procurement requesting board approval to award a design-build contract in the amount of $80,350,000 to complete station enhancements at 8 Long Island Railroad stations. A subsequent MTA Board application to award a second contract for 6 remaining stations will follow this initial application. This contract is an integral part of the Governor's 17 Enhanced Station Initiative Program for the Long Island Railroad, which is being implemented to improve and upgrade the customer experience. I'll note that Long Island Railroad does not have the ability to fully undertake the design-build services for the Long Island Railroad Enhanced Station Initiative project with in-house forces, and the contract will be funded by the Long Island Railroad capital budget. We also have a multi-agency competitive procurement with MTA Capital Construction and Metro North Railroad seeking board approval in the aggregate amount not to exceed $56 million to enter into competitive solicited personal service contracts to provide professional staffing and services on an as-needed basis to support the planning and management of MTA projects.
For questions and comments, may I have a motion? Second. Mr. Birdler.
With respect to the Ansaldo, I believe we have an agreement from Long Island Railroad that there will be an integrity monitor on this contract, given Ansaldo's long-standing, or its parents' long-standing record of SAIs.
Is that your understanding, Mr. Ross?
That's correct. We are going to look into the ability to have a integrity monitor on that.
So in case that wasn't on the mic, that is correct, confirmed by Long Island Railroad.
Is there anyone else? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? The procurements carry.
So for New York City Transit and MTA bus operations, there are 5 competitive procurements for RFPs and modifications to existing agreements for a grand total of $1,687,462,193. The first requests board approval to award a contract to Kawasaki Rail Car for the total amount of $1,444,997,948. And Steve Plachaki is here to present.
Is there any questions?
If there are any questions, I know it's presented at the Transit Committee, so, right, so it's presented at the Transit Committee, but in case. So New York City Transit is also requesting approval of the board to award a contract for Package 4 of the Enhanced Station Initiative for the design and construction of improvements at 23rd and 57th Street, 6th Avenue I&D, 28th Street, Lexington Avenue IRT, 34th Street, Penn Station, 7th Avenue IRT, and 34th Street, Penn Station, 8th Avenue I&D to Judlow Contracting in the amount of $124,949,000.
Mr. Ross, given that we took an earlier vote in transit, I don't want to mix apples and oranges here. Let's split this off right now and deal with it, and deal with these as they come. Let me have a motion first. Second, discussion. We discussed all this already, people in this room.
Referring to the Enhanced Station Initiative now? Because you also mentioned the R211 contract.
That's coming up. That's coming up. We're going to divide these things
PSIs, right?
just to be consistent with our actions earlier in the day. On these procurements, the car procurements, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? The procurements carry. Please continue.
So you want Enhanced Station we'll do next, right?
ESI
so,
and
right. So New York. So they're requesting
all of ESI.
Okay. So ESI and New York City Transit is requesting approval from the board to award a contract, as I just read in, for $124,949,000 for Package 4, and in accordance with MTA policy regarding the use of design build, the solicitation included a stipend of $100,000 to be paid to each unsuccessful proposer whose proposal is responsive to the RFP requirements. Accordingly, permission is also requested to pay a total stipend of $200,000. This is the fourth of several construction contracts to be awarded under the ESI program. Another ESI initiative, we're requesting board approval to award a contract for Package 8 of the ESI for the design and construction of improvements at 174, 175th Street, Concourse I&D, and 167th Street, Concourse I&D in the Bronx, and 145th Street Lexington Avenue IRT in Manhattan to Sitnalta Fort joint venture in the amount of $87,987,000.
Just to correct that, it's 145th and Lenox, not Lexington.
145th Street Lenox Avenue IRT. Thank you, that's correct.
Before any...
And I should note additionally for that one, there's similarly the $100,000 paid to the unsuccessful proposals. In that case, there were 3, so it's $300,000 for board approval there.
Before questions and comment, I have a motion. Second, questions and comment. Over and above, I hope, what was done before, because we're all there already.
I believe we have a monitor on this one as well. Am I right, Steve? Judlow?
There's already a monitor, yes.
Okay, all in favor? Let's do a show of hands, right? All in favor? Okay, got it? All opposed? Abstaining? Procurement carries. Thank you. Please continue.
Sure. New York City Transit is seeking board approval for a modification for an additional consulting services and extension to provide continued consultant services of CH2M Hill, New York, Incorporated, to support the MTA New Fare Payment System Program Office during design reviews and the phased implementation of NFPS for $9,528,245. The modification includes additional post-award consulting services that will be required to support the NFPS program, including oversight of the implementation of the railroad and FCA land installations, which was not part of the original CH2M scope, and additionally review of New York City Transit and Railroad's fare payment rules to ensure that such rules are incorporated into the design of the NFPS, and additional oversight of NFPS contractor during the phased implementation approach. Finally, New York City Transit, keep going on this, right? Yeah. Finally, New York City Transit is proposing to extend 5 federal and 5 state-funded professional and technical staffing contracts by an additional 6 months for an aggregate funding of $20 million. This increase in funding is required to meet New York City Transit, MTA Capital Construction, and MTA Bus Company staffing needs. In September 2011, the board approved the award of 10 competitively solicited contracts to 5 staffing firms to provide professional and technical staffing to support New York City Transit, MTACC, MTABC, and MNR's federal and state-funded capital projects on an as-needed basis for a period of 60 months for a not-to-exceed aggregate pool of $63 million. The current aggregate amount across all federal and state contracts is $75 million. Metro North's portion of $8 million, which is not changed by this modification. The 5 awardees were HEPCO Incorporated, Peak Technical Staffing USA, Rotator Staffing Services Incorporated, Metrotech Consulting Services Incorporated, and LJ Gonzer Associates.
Is there a motion? Second. Any comment or question? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? Those items carry. There's nothing for bridges and tunnels?
No items for bridges and tunnels, no items for FemTech.
Then I'll ask Mr. Johnson to take it from here.
And next would be Mr. Florio with real estate. There are 3 action items for consideration. The first is a renewal of a lease for MTA Capital Construction at its hub facility in Northern Boulevard in Long Island City. It is a renewal of up to 7 years, but after the 2nd year of the renewal, we have the ability to terminate upon 1 year's notice. The second item is for Metro North. It's an exchange of property rights in Tarrytown. Metro North had encroached on a neighboring party's property. They had similarly encroached on our property, and the instruments would codify a mutually beneficial exchange of property interests. And the third is in Ronkonkoma for Long Island Railroad. An adjacent property owner, Tritech, is developing a mixed-use development just north and east of the station, and they wish to use a portion of our vacant right-of-way for staging as they sink columns for their foundation.
Before any questions or comments, may I have a motion? Second. Questions or comments on these real estate items? Hearing none. All in favor? Opposed?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I vote aye on A and B and recuse myself on C.
That'll be recorded.
Thank you.
Opposed? Abstaining? These real estate items carry. And now, may I have a motion to adjourn? Second. All in favor? This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
It's working, man.